All right, so here's how we're going to do this. We're going to talk initially about the mission of CEE. Then we're going to move on to sort of broader macro issues and other things that are out there. So um, I want to start with Ben Bernanke. Ben, I guess you're ready for this, but while Nan was talking about inequality, I remembered covering one of your speeches, and I went back during this event here while it was going on. I looked at what you said, 2007, Ben. I think you were among the first Fed chairman, maybe not the first, but certainly made a big issue of the both inequality and the connection of education, financial education, to inequality. So first, thanks for doing that. And second, I remember you got a little heat for when you first started talking about that issue. How has that issue progressed and the Fed dealing with inequality as an issue?
Well, it's a big issue, and it's been getting worse. This recession we're suffering now, people call it the K-shaped recession because those of us who are lucky enough to be able to work from home and keep our jobs are doing okay. People who work in the service industries, for example, lower income communities are hit much harder. So Nan talked about Raj Chetty and his work about mobility. It's a real concern. It's been worsening over a long period of time. And, the Fed thinks about it a lot. For example, the recent changes in the framework to put a bigger emphasis on the labor market is really intended to try to give more people a chance to get a good job and good wages.
I want to come back to that a little later, but first let me ask Kathleen about that. Kathleen, I was fascinated by the poll that we did here, and it was sort of fun, but I think it might be right in the sense that people probably mostly get their economic education from their mom and their dad. I think that's true with at least my early education. So what does it mean if your mom and your dad don't know about finance?
It has been a real challenge because there's so many people who really are intimidated by the investing process and by the markets, and therefore they get paralyzed. And so it is so critically important, the work that CE is doing and others, as well as our teachers across the country, to help kids and parents have that conversation. And when I was watching some of the award winners, and they were talking about how the kids are actually taking the packets home in this virtual environment, it's a great opportunity for more families to have these conversations. I will say, Steve, I mentioned this to you earlier, we have a silver lining of this pandemic and the fallout of it is that more and more people have gotten engaged and either have opened accounts or are calling us more to check in on their accounts. And that's a really good sign versus a decade ago with the last crisis in terms of people being paralyzed versus at least being engaged.
James, I want to just change the question a little bit for you. I'm fascinated by the work that you do with our military veterans. What are the specific challenges there when it comes to economic education, and what kind of difference can economic education make for the prospects for the military veterans?
In America, the average American moves about every 7 or 8 years. A military member moves about every 24 to 36 months. So they have a lot of financial decisions to make, whether the buy versus rent decision, when to buy a car, what type of car, new or used. So there's a lot of sort of decisions that get accelerated. A lot of young service members, 80,000 new enlisted soldiers join the Army every year, 17 to 21 years old, and they're thrown into where they're deploying around the world, and they still got to make their payments and keep their credit scores where they are. So it's a lot thrown on them very early. So that high school education is so important to so many in the military as they join the service.
Ben, one more question for you on this topic. The Fed has a dual mandate of maximum employment and stable prices. How does the issue of inequality into that dual mandate?
Well, again, the labor market is the key. That's where you can have the most effect. And what we saw in the labor market before the recession, when the unemployment rate got down to 3.5%, this was something the Fed found out when they went around the country and listened to people and heard from them about how monetary policy affects their lives, that very low unemployment rate gave more people opportunities to enter the labor force, to get skills, to earn higher wages. And that's, I think, the most effective thing the Fed can do. It can also do things like help minority banks and things of that sort. But the labor market is really the best conduit for helping lower income people.
Kathleen, let me change now or shift gears a little bit towards the macro situation. And I think you're on the front lines, and I think James also, and then I want to get Ben sort of probably a higher altitude view on all this. What is it like today in terms of the calls that you're getting from individual investors? I know it's a broad group of individual investors you deal with, but on the one hand, last week on Thursday at 8:30, we reported that there were 890,000, I believe, new jobless claims out in the economy, and yet the market is between 1% and 2% of its all-time highs. How do you square that?
You know, in terms of the customers and what they're calling about, first of all, as I said earlier, they're calling more. And so to this point about jobless, we're actually hiring thousands of financial professionals because the demand is so much higher. And so that demand is coming from several groups. One is young investors. Both are opening accounts at record levels and are actually calling. There's, I think, a myth that young people don't want to turn to experts for help. They actually do. They're calling a lot. I think another category are these pre-retirees that are closer to retirement and saying, what does this mean for me and what are we heading into? A third category, to the point Dr. Bernate was making, is when there are more job losses, we also, as the retirement leader in the country, get tens of thousands of calls from people who are trying to figure out what to do now. And so I'll tell you, I listen to about 20 hours of customer calls every month just to stay in touch with what people are doing. And some of the calls are really tough in this environment. And, in this economy where there's this barbell of some companies doing great and others so challenged.
After buy low, sell high, give us the two best pieces of advice that you guys provide.
Well, for people that have a long enough time horizon, just hold, just stay put, because those people, the last time that panicked and got out of the market, over 25% of them never got back in. And so and others try and time the market and then they lose the upside. So if you've got a time horizon that's long enough, just hold on. Second piece of advice is, if you've got a lot of concerns, call a professional, call us, call somebody so we can talk you through what the right alternatives are.
So buy low, sell high, and don't jump. Those are two good pieces of advice. Let me turn to James. James, I was just thinking about covering the financial crisis under when Ben Bernanke was chairman. And I guess he would kill right now for what's happening in your business, which is the previous financial crisis was a housing crisis. The Fed cut interest rates and the housing market didn't respond. And here you are right now. I mean, tell me what kind of boom you're going through right now in terms of mortgages and what's happening out there in the housing market.
Well, PenFed's sort of a mid-market lender, direct to the consumer across America. In a normal year like last year, we'd do about $2 billion in mortgage lending to the individual consumer. We've already done close to $7 billion this year, and we have nearly $5 billion in the pipeline. So think about 5x growth. Every American that has a mortgage has a free put option on their mortgage, so they can refinance down. Every day I wake up, one of my members, my 2.1 million members, they can go to 5,200 other credit unions to refinance, or 5,000 banks and thrifts. So I have 10,000 competitors every day that would love that business. So with no prepayment penalty, 60% of our mortgage want to sort of refinance down. So as Kathleen was talking about the phone ringing, let's just say it rings 24/7, 7 days a week as people are trying to capture these low mortgage rates.
So if we took a wide shot of your office there's going to be a cot on the left side. That's the only way you can do a 5X. Are you hiring people, James?
We are hiring like crazy across the industry. If you're in the mortgage business across America, any mortgage lender right now is paying premiums, retention bonuses to hire the best and the brightest to be able to meet this demand. But as we know in America, there's cycles, and hence the importance of economic education. The one thing that concerns me is so many people are on the purchase money side because the rates are very low. But I attribute it to having an urban apartment and there's a lawnmower for sale, 75% off. If you don't need it, just because it's a good deal doesn't mean you need to jump in the market right now. But all the neighbors are buying new houses or upgrading, so you have everybody rushing to get a mortgage. Really see where it fits into your financial plan, and the importance of educators educating people. The buy versus rent decision is always important in every economic cycle.
James, I want to underscore that just a little bit. It sounds to me like you're afraid people are not making the right assessment here in terms of that relative to the decline in rents and the rise in housing prices. For at least some people, they shouldn't be running after purchases right now and should consider rental options.
Everybody should refinance if they can get a lower rate. That is just no prepayment penalty. That's great for every consumer. Right. But to purchase, you always have to see where it fits into your plan. If you're a young professional and you might be moving in 2 or 3
right.
years, to buy something in the suburbs that you're going to have to sell, there's a lot of transactional costs, the maintenance costs. A lot of people think they're just going to run out their properties. If you look at Airbnb and some of these others, they're booked now that people are working from home across America. So you really have to take in basically that decision each and every time. But it's got to fit into your life plan. Just because something's inexpensive versus sort of historically doesn't mean it's the right purchase for you now.
Right. I will disclose that I have a you guys were the only guys offering this 5-year mortgage that it's a 5-year mortgage that resets for 5 years. And because I had a long-term view of interest rates going down, my mortgage rate has gone down twice now in the 15 years I think I've had this with you guys, or the 10 plus 5, I guess, is where we're at right now.
The average consumer stays in their house less than 7 years, and we thought that was a product that really serves our membership well.
I was going to move, but I didn't. Ben, because of the flight, I haven't had a chance to have coffee with you in quite a while, so I haven't had a chance to catch up. And actually, I don't miss the shuttle, I have to tell you, of all the things that I'm not doing right now. Getting on the shuttle to Washington is something that I don't miss at all. Give me your broad view. I don't understand. I mean, I do this every day, and I don't know that I'm even remotely successful at it. Trying to forecast what's going to happen when you have an election coming up, you have a stimulus bill that may or may not be happening, and you have a COVID crisis that was on the wane and came back, and now we're somehow approaching our third peak. How would you be thinking about and trying to assess the future other than calling the Fed staff every couple minutes?
Well, that's a good strategy, but it's been a little stronger this year than some expected. I have to say, housing has been a big part of that, but we're still in a mighty deep hole. Only about half the jobs that were lost in March and April have been recovered. And going forward, I think most indications are that we're going to be moving slower. We have, first of all, the third wave of the virus, which is keeping people home. Secondly, a lot of the low-hanging fruit's been picked here. You know, the housing industry, manufacturing, other sectors where people can work, they've gone back to work. But the service industries, restaurants, brick and mortar retail, travel, leisure, those sectors are still quite depressed, and they're not likely to get back to full employment for a while. And then the third issue, which you mentioned, there was probably some news today about it, is the fiscal situation. We've not seen a follow through of the strong fiscal action we saw earlier. And so all those things suggest that, as somebody said, it was going to be down on the elevator, but up on the stairs, and the stairs are getting a little steeper as we go forward.